everyone, and welcome back to another podcast. Today, we are going to be exploring the chapter of exploration, the second last chapter in the first year curriculum. So, in this chapter, we are going to be looking at a few key things. Why did people want to explore? The technology they used while exploring. We are going to focus in on Portugal and Spain, and then we are going to look at two key personalities. And these two personalities are Christopher Columbus and Hernan Cortes. And then finally, we are going to look at the consequences of exploration on Europe as a continent and then on the countries that were explored as a whole. Now, this is a really lovely chapter to get asked questions on, and it's a very predictable chapter because they always ask the same questions, which is great. So sit back, relax, and let's get to learning. So there was a couple main reasons why people wanted to explore. The first of these was the influence from the Renaissance, which was our last chapter, where we saw that people began to question everything that they thought they knew. So this led to people wanting to explore the world and learn more about it. As well as that, countries wanted to expand their territory and gain more money, as well as spreading their religion, which, for the majority of these countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, England, France, they would have been Catholic. Tools used on board the ship were very similar to tools that are used today, but obviously not as modern. So they had a compass, they had a map, then they had three different ones that you can get asked. So you can get asked what a quadrant and astroglobe are, and this is to measure the longitude and latitude on the map, so where you are placed and your positioning in the world. You can get asked what a log and line is, which measures the speed of the ship by putting in the log into the water and letting the rope go out of your hands. You would count the knots, and this would tell you how many knots you are traveling, what your speed is. And lastly, they used what is known as a line and lead, which measured the depth of the ocean. So the line would have a piece of lead at the end, which would obviously be heavy. They would place it into the ocean and they would count how deep it went based on knots going through the hand again. So quite similar to the log and line. Now, our most early explorer to look at is Diaz from Portugal. Diaz set sail from the coast of Portugal and he followed the coastline down of Africa around the continent until he came to the southerlymost tip, which became known as the Cape of Good Hope. Later, another explorer known as Da Gama followed the exact same route, and once he reached the Cape of Good Hope, he continued to travel until he came to India. This created a new trade route to trade spices, silk, all different types of goods between the two countries. The Spanish then followed suit, with Christopher Columbus setting sail for the Spanish king and queen. Now, my fun fact for this chapter is that the king and queen of Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, their daughter, funny enough, married King Henry VIII, and she was Catherine of Aragon, who is King Henry VIII's first wife. Just so crazy to see how these two chapters in history clearly link together and are happening at the same time. So, Columbus set sail from Spain with 3 ships, and he travelled the opposite way to India, thinking that by going to the left of the map, he could bypass just through the ocean and come round India on the opposite side. Nobody had travelled this way before, so he thought he would be the first to do it. Instead, of course, we know that he reached America, which he then thought was India, and this is why they are called Native Americans or Native Indians, because he thought that he had landed in India. Now, another fun fact is he actually didn't know where he was going for a lot of the time. His journals from his captain's log reveal that he actually was quite lost and would tell his crew, "Oh, we're nearly there, when in actual fact he didn't know where he was. So he wasn't the best captain to have. And of course, there is a lot of controversy around him and how he treated his crew and then how he treated the natives once he landed in America. He was actually disgraced by the time he was buried, and he was not, obviously America wasn't named after him because he was such a bad explorer, if you will. But he is still a key personality for this chapter because he found America by going a different route. So, depending on what school you're in, you will either look at the Incas in Peru with Pizarro, or you will look at the Aztecs in Mexico who were found by Cortez. I myself, as a teacher, look at the Aztecs, so this is who I will be focusing on here in the podcast. So, Hernan Cortez left with 500 men from Spain and travelled to Mexico, thinking that he would be able to find new riches for his nation. And of course, he was right. He landed in Mexico and took advantage of the native people, who thought that he was a god. When he arrived, he was covered in his armour and he had feathers and jewels. And if you actually look at pictures of their gods, you can see why they thought he was one of them. Because he resembled one very loosely. Obviously, these people had never seen someone different before, so they took it that their God had come down from the heavens to be with them in the flesh. They treated the Spaniards very well, the Aztecs did, until they noticed that they were actually stealing from them. This then led to the Aztecs fighting back and kicking them out of the city, which was known as Tecolonian. That is probably not how you pronounce it, but hey, the Aztecs aren't here to correct me. Cortez, however, did come back and lay a 3-month siege on the city and eventually won due to basically starving the population within the city. They weren't prepared to face off against such attackers. They didn't have up-to-date weapons. They were fighting with bows and arrows and spears, while the Spaniards had cannons and horses and armour. And this was obviously a very big disadvantage for them. So you can get asked the effects on the nation that was explored, the indigenous nation, as a result of exploration in an exam. It's a lovely question to get, and it's a really easy answer to learn off. So the results of exploration on the indigenous population, such as the Aztecs or the Incas, is disease and death was brought to them. So a lot of them died off. They didn't have modern diseases such as the common cold, smallpox, so their immune systems weren't able to fight off these diseases. Their culture was destroyed. Their cities were burned down. All of their gold was melted and turned into money. Their people were taken and made into slaves, and this started the slave trade, going with routes back and forth. Young children were sold into slavery and taken from their homeland and never returned. And also their religion was taken from them. Where they would have prayed to many different gods, such as the sun god, the wind god, it was now replaced with Christianity. So their religion, their culture, everything was stripped from them. Likewise, guys, you can get asked the effects upon Europe from exploring. Now, obviously, the effects for Europe and the outcomes would be a lot more positive than for the indigenous population. So, Europe got new slaves, they got new foods such as chocolate, fruits, and new animals were brought back such as monkeys, snakes, parrots, all these different exotic animals, and rich and wealthy people would show them off to show this is my wealth that I now own a parrot from the Amazon, for example. As well as that, new materials were brought back, such as gold, silver, precious gems, all different things that just made these countries even wealthier. The last thing to look at, guys, when we are looking at the age of exploration is the Treaty of Tordesillas. So, Tordesillas is a place in Spain, and this is where people from Portugal and Spain met and how they agreed to split up the land that they had discovered. So when we're talking about this land, we're mainly talking about Central America and Southern America. Okay, so obviously, as we know, if you were to look at a map, Brazil is the only Portuguese speaking country in South America. This is because they agreed to create a line going down the continent and splitting it up, so Spain would get one half